Last night, at least 19 Russian drones flew into Polish territory, crashing mostly in the eastern regions.
Wykonywały zadania.
They were carrying out their tasks. This was not an accident, it was deliberate. Now, it will be necessary for authorities to assess the credibility of the information we already have, and at the same time figure out what to do next. If one or two drones had violated our airspace, it could have been some kind of error. However, the sheer number of drones indicates it was a deliberate act of provocation. It appears that at least some of the unmanned aerial vehicles were Gerberas, a Russian-made version of the Iranian Shahed drones. The Russians used the Geran and Gerbera systems to attack Polish territory, which, in my opinion, meets the criteria for activating NATO Article 4. The security of the Polish state has been violated, and therefore the Polish side should consult with its allies. These are drones that are capable of performing combat tasks. These drones don't just fly around to annoy people. Their main task is to lure air defense systems, drawing fire and the air defense systems onto themselves. In Ukraine, they fly in groups with armed Shaheds, and they draw the attention of Ukrainian air defense, so that air defense has a smaller chance of hitting an armed Shahed. So far, there have been no reports of the drones being armed with real warheads, but that does not mean they cannot be dangerous. Gerbera-type drones, which are decoy drones, are equipped with a kind of explosive, whose purpose is to eliminate small groups of people like, for example, sappers sent to disarm or dismantle the wreckage of other drones. This is undoubtedly a test of the entire air defense system to see how it will work, when and how quickly planes will be scrambled and weapons will be deployed. The trajectories of the unmanned machines may indicate that the drones could have been flying towards Polish cities. According to experts, the Kremlin's goal may have been to test Poland's air defense and NATO's response. The operation of defense systems, the entire communication scheme, the actions taken by NATO, the time it took to achieve readiness of forces, and the means to respond. This is part of continuing Russian operations aimed at NATO, whose entire purpose is to probe the space of operations below the threshold of aggression, below the threshold of war. This is an escalation meant to cause destabilization. We are dealing with a kind of escalation of aggression. First, one drone, then more drones, without warheads. After some time, if there is no adequate response, they could send armed Shaheds. So we can see a consistent pattern of escalation on the part of Russia. When Russian drones intruded into Polish territory, the decision was made to destroy the unmanned aerial vehicles. They were neutralized. We will not discuss the numbers at this stage. The matter is still under investigation. The system was very overloaded, but all subjects which, in the opinion of the operational commander of the armed forces, pose a threat to security were attempted to be neutralized. This isn't the first such incident. A few weeks ago, Russian drones crashed in Poland's Lubelskie and Podlaskie regions. All this illustrates that Poland does not have a comprehensive anti-drone system. I am glad that the Polish army reacted. I am disappointed because it had to use aviation. It is not economical to use aircraft against drones because it is simply very expensive. But this is because we do not have our own drone detection and destruction systems, so there has undoubtedly been negligence in this area over the last several months. Poland's previous government, which was in office until late 2023, purchased the anti-drone system known as Sky Control. Today, this system's status remains unknown. This system has not only been underutilized, but, as I understand it, it has been removed from the borders for political reasons, even though it was supposed to be tested for effectiveness. It is not a particularly expensive system. Therefore, Poland now faces a difficult task: quickly building a system to combat unmanned aerial vehicles. We do not know what the future will look like, but Russia's past actions give us a clue. The Kremlin, smelling blood in the water, will keep escalating until either it is stopped or a full war breaks out.
After Russian drones entered Polish territory, the President and Prime Minister immediately began talks with Poland's allies. I have remained in regular contact with the presidents of allied countries, as well as NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte. After consultations between the Prime Minister and the President, Poland officially requested the activation of Article 4 of the NATO treaty. The parties will consult together whenever, in the opinion of any of them, the territorial integrity, political independence, or security of any of the parties is threatened. The Allied consultations I am referring to have now taken the form of a formal request to invoke Article 4. The President and Prime Minister agree that this is the correct time to invoke Article 4. We have never dealt with such a situation before. We are facing something absolutely exceptional, so it is extremely important that there be unity and Allied responsibility here. This is an important step indicating readiness for action. Since NATO was founded, Article 4 has been invoked 7 times.
Allies expressed solidarity with Poland and denounced Russia's reckless behavior. The Supreme Allied Commander will continue to actively manage our deterrence and defense posture along the entire eastern flank. Allies are resolved to defend every inch of Allied territory. We will closely monitor the situation along our eastern flank, our air defenses continually at the ready.
This will involve the internationalization of the action we saw tonight. It will be necessary, I hope, to mobilize further forces from Allied countries to strengthen NATO's eastern flank. It is precisely because of the need to defend in NATO's eastern flank that Polish politicians expect concrete action from NATO. We should expect support both in terms of air defense against all possible means of air attack and in terms of long-range reconnaissance. These are all elements of armament and technology that cannot be purchased overnight. We must expect solidarity from our allies because, with our own resources and forces alone, we will not be able to secure our border, which is also NATO's eastern flank. This is not supposed to be just a paper alliance, but an alliance in which, when Europe is threatened, all countries must act as one. Because the only argument that gets through to Russia is the argument of force. This is a kind of test. The Kremlin is testing Poland's ability to respond to such an attack and testing the unity of the alliance, as well as the reaction of allies to what has happened. We must be prepared for such violations of our airspace to intensify. It is not only Poland that must be vigilant. Other Baltic states are also aware of the threat.
Because those incidents are very close to the situations when everything is going to escalate, and where everyone will be involved into something that we want to avoid. And the key to avoid that and the key to prevent this from happening is protection and pressure on Russia.
In the event of armed aggression against one of its allies, the North Atlantic Alliance may invoke Article 5 of the NATO treaty. The parties agree that an armed attack against one or more of them in Europe or North America shall be considered an attack against them all, and consequently they agree that, if such an armed attack occurs, each of them, in the exercise of the right of individual or collective self-defense recognized by Article 51 of the Charter of the United Nations, will assist the party or parties so attacked by taking forthwith, individually and in concert with the other parties, such action as it deems necessary, including the use of armed force, to restore and maintain the security of the North Atlantic area. First, NATO's spearhead is activated, followed by Allied forces in accordance with guidelines that are strictly confidential, and the activation of these forces is clearly specified. At this point, however, there are no prospects for the activation of Article 5. We are dealing not so much with aggression as with a violation of airspace, a serious incident. The response of Poland and the alliance should be clear, but let's be honest, this is not a war, this is not a conflict that would trigger Article 5 of the NATO treaty. To date, Article 5 has only been invoked once after the attacks of September the 11th, 2001. As a result, many NATO countries, including Poland, became involved in military operations and support activities in Afghanistan. American-made F-16 and F-35 fighter jets, aerial tankers and an early warning and reconnaissance aircraft belonging to the United States Air Force are in the air over Poland. Another rotational change of American soldiers with Bradley fighting vehicles is on its way to Poland. The Americans have given assurances that they are ready to defend Poland if necessary. We stand with our NATO allies in the face of airspace violations and will defend every inch of NATO territory. Given Russia's escalation, today we can see how important Polish President Karol Nawrocki's visit to the White House was, as well as the Americans' declaration regarding the presence of US troops in Poland.
Will American soldiers remain in Poland?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, do you know something I don't? I don't know. Yeah, we're very happy. If anything, we'll put more there if they want. But They've long wanted to have a larger presence. We have some countries that have more, not too many, but no, they'll be staying in Poland. We're very much aligned with Poland.
Donald Trump's administration is trying to stop the war in Ukraine, primarily through diplomatic means. Negotiation teams are working on both the Washington-Kyiv and Washington-Moscow fronts. According to the president's own announcements, he will be talking to representatives of Western European countries as well as Putin himself in the coming days.
We're going to see. I mean, we have some very interesting discussions. You know, Europe, certain European leaders are coming over to our country on Monday or Tuesday, and individually. And I think we're going to get that settled. I think we're going to get it settled.
On the other hand, the metaphorical nuclear option is a package of sanctions being prepared by European countries and the United States. According to analysts, the decisions made in the coming weeks could significantly affect the position of Russia, but also Ukraine.
On the one hand, Europeans have frozen Russian assets worth over $200 billion. Confiscating them by the European Union should obviously be a big step. This would be an open option available to European countries. The Americans have already imposed secondary sanctions on Russian oil exports to India. They could extend them to Russian partners in Europe and other countries. So there is still considerable scope for expansion in the area of sanctions.
For Poland, the key issue today is the presence of American soldiers on Polish territory and clear statements from American diplomats regarding the support that Washington is ready to give us. At the same time, the Americans are well aware that Putin may be testing not only NATO's ability to respond to escalation, but also the global credibility of the United States. This afternoon, the American president posted a very telling message on social media. What's with Russia violating Poland's airspace with drones? Here we go.